podcast. I'm Nick, joined as always by Zach, Brad, and Brock. We're here to cover some MMA headlines. We do have a card this upcoming weekend, Tyron Woodley versus Gilbert Burns. But I wanted to start with some headlines that have been grabbing a lot of people's attention recently. The first thing that we were just talking about was Coby Covington apparently left American Top Team. That's very unfortunate to hear because I feel like it was a lot of guys in there that could benefit from his skills and vice versa, where what Brock talked about, where you have guys, iron sharpens iron, where having a guy like Dustin Poirier working with Coby Covington, that was very beneficial for both guys. And I don't know too much about the story. I don't think really too much is out quite yet as far as why. And there's definitely been a lot of drama in that gym. But Brad, what do you make of this news that Coby Covington is possibly leaving America? Actually, he is leaving American Top Team.
I mean, we know Colby's explosive attitude and the way he does his whole show and stuff, and it's not all just in the cage. I'm kind of just skimming through this stuff right here right now, but I mean, I think more of it as just a career move for him. When you get to the elite level where he's clearly at, you need a training camp focused solely on you.
I mean, he took a tough loss. You know what I mean? And when you take a tough loss, sometimes you got to reevaluate. And, you know, does he need to leave ATT? You know,
Probably
or
not,
is this just a reset for him?
I mean, he probably doesn't need to leave ATT, but he probably feels like a change is good for him. And if you look at the elite guys in every division, from top to bottom or bottom to top, the top guy, the top contender and the champion and top couple guys, they're doing their own camps focused around on them. Khabib's camp focused on Khabib. Tony's camp was always focused on Tony. Justin's camp focused on Justin. Stipe, nobody else even trains with Stipe. Not literally, trains with Weidman and Volante and all that, but it's his camp. You know, you can go from the top to bottom.
Sure. I mean, yeah, you see that a lot more now.
Mm-hmm. It's I don't know if there's more to it. Like,
I mean, a lot of these guys, you know, they know how to fight, and there's certain skills that need to sharpen, but a lot of it is, you know, game plan and conditioning at this level, starting to get to there.
For sure, I think
there's a few guys who have elite something. You know, the Adesanyas who have elite striking. I mean, you have a couple guys who have an elite, you know, Khabib with his wrestling, but most guys, you know, a lot of fights seem to come down to game plan and conditioning at this point.
Yeah, especially at the top level where everybody's more or less evenly matched, not skill for skill, but overall at least. I don't make too much of Colby leaving. I guess there's beef. There's always beef with Poirier and Masvidal, but those are possible fights.
That's honestly my point. That's my thing is, like, I think maybe this is a good thing overall because it seems like that gym has been in the headlines for the wrong reasons over the past 2 years, even with, you know, Robbie Lawler leaving and that creating a lot of drama. And then apparently Masvidal and Colby having a falling out and that's becoming headlines. And it just seems like a big drama show with them recently and less about the fighting. And you don't want your gym in the headlines for that reason. And what you're saying, Brad, is you want a camp solely dedicated to you if you're a top level fighter. Even if Colby had that, maybe it still wouldn't have been a good move to stay there.
Well, Colby clearly has different needs than what he had before. And you have to figure he's going to do what's best for him in his career, at least as he sees it. There's a lot of culture in fighting and about staying with your gym, never leaving your gym, loyalty and stuff, which some of it is earned and great. I mean, we love our gym, but sometimes you need a change. You need a new outlook. You need a fresh set of eyes on your game plan, on your skill set. And I don't make much of it, especially considering that Masvidal for sure, and even Dustin can go to 70. He's kind of big.
Yeah, he probably walks around at like 185. At least when we met him, he was I think he said he was about 185. I mean, he was pretty thick.
Yeah,
Like
they're
he put
both
some size on. Yeah.
potential opponents that you can get something behind, build a fight behind for Colby. So that's the way I see it.
Obviously, we'll follow that as the story comes in. We'll see what gym Colby goes to. But Brock, do you think we'll see like a different Colby Covington? You think we might see him increase his game once he finds a new gym, wherever that may be?
Well, he's a wrestler now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his striking's really good. I think, at least in my opinion, he has pretty solid striking. It's obviously not. It's not like it's the best in the division, but he has very good striking. His wrestling is obviously one of the best. You're not going to really beat that.
The gas tank too.
Yeah, insane gas tank. That's all. He's got like impossible lung capacity. The dude doesn't get tired. I don't know if we're going to see a change in him as much as we're just going to see maybe not as physical as it will be mental. And I think that's what's going to benefit him greatly. Like you were saying with ATT, there's all this drama going on. I mean, even when we met Dustin Poirier, how many months ago was that we met Dustin Poirier, Nick?
I'm trying to remember the fight that was going on at the time.
It's been a while. It's been, safe to say, like 6 months?
Easily, yeah.
Yeah, so even 6 months ago, or at least 6 months ago, when we met him and mentioned, so basically this was pre-Usman Covington, and we asked him, hey man, who do you think is going to win? And he said, I think Covington's going to win, but if I'm being honest, I'd like to see his fucking face beat in. Was almost like exactly what he said. So obviously there's a lot of things going on within the gym. I think that's his best move mentally is going to be him leaving there, getting with a smaller gym, maybe like a one-on-one type situation with a coach where they're actually going to be able to focus solely on him and his career. I do think it sucks that he's not going to have Steve Mocco for wrestling. He's missing a lot of striking coaches, a lot of great training partners, but maybe that one-on-one experience of a slightly smaller gym, not one of these big mainstream like super gyms, that might be what brings him even higher and maybe gets him the next title shot or gets him the title.
To wrap this up, a place I'd actually think he would do well, and I mean, you guys tell me what you think real quick. Trevor Whitman has shown us again and again and again and again how amazing of a coach he is. Crazy good striking coach with Rose, and just recently with Justin. I think Colby with Trevor Whitman game planning behind him, that could be amazing. But Nick, I also wanted to talk to you about Conor posting about who's the GOAT and putting himself as like the number 4 GOAT currently.
I think he even said as high as number 2.
Well, he said, he said a lot of things. And then he said that by the end of his career, he will be the GOAT. Which leads us to the discussion of what do you think about where he put people? He puts Anderson at top, then John, then GSP, then himself. He makes some decent arguments talking about how GSP avenged every loss he ever had, won the belt in 2 divisions. He has John.
Did you guys like? You might seem all topic, but I'll come back around to it. Did you guys all watch the Jordan documentary, The Last Dance?
No,
I haven't.
I haven't.
Really good, even if you're not a basketball fan.
Right.
But watching that gives you a real insight into what is required to truly be the GOAT. You know what I mean? To really be the greatest. You know, and Michael, shows everybody that you got to sacrifice a lot of different things, a lot of relationships and a lot of personal time and stuff like that to be the best. And you also got to look at the competition. And that's one of the issues with some of those guys. I honestly think John might have had the stiffest competition. I mean, you look at the murderers row that he went up against. You look at, he fought TRT Vitor Belfort.
John Jones.
I mean, like, he fought TRT Vitor and won.
John Jones
had his arm almost snapped.
John Jones has beaten most of the 205-pound champions that there have ever been.
Yeah.
He's beaten more than there are left. Yeah, his run is amazing.
I bet you John Jones has beat more Hall of Famers than any other fighter.
For sure.
That's
He's
good.
definitely in like the top 3, if not number one.
I mean, who? The only other person I can think off the top of my head that's up there is Verdum, and he's got like 3 or 4 like of the heavyweight greats.
Yeah,
he tapped
Shogun, arguably Hall of
John,
Famer. John, John took the title from him.
Mm-hmm.
Machida, another guy who could very well get into the Hall of Fame.
Rashad,
Rashad, potentially. Rampage, exactly, and
Forrest.
DC.
Twice, convincingly.
Didn't Rashad Evans get put in this year? Isn't he getting put in this year?
He did.
If he is,
Rashad
then,
Rashad is in. I mean, just the people that John has beaten in general, you have to have him up there on your GOAT. But Nick, you were right. Conor does have himself at number 2 behind Anderson Silva, which I think is silly. Anderson Silva shouldn't have been considered the GOAT.
It seems like with the sport of mixed martial arts, it's still so young, and we have to remember that. And it seems like everybody's answer for GOAT changes like every month. One month it's Anderson Silva, next it's John Jones, next it's Demetrius Johnson, and it goes on and on and on. And the thing is,
my answer was the same for about a decade until John Jones came and proved me wrong.
GSP or Fedor?
GSP.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you cannot forget the old head Fedor.
Oh, for sure. But
yeah, I mean, like you guys are doing a good job of bringing like factual arguments to the table, and I think that one of the fallacies with GOAT arguments is that people make their own criteria. There's so many different criteria.
Yeah, for sure.
Conor McGregor is talking about finishing rate. I mean, I guess that's somewhat important, finishing people, but do you look at GSP's resume as less impressive because he has quite a few decisions? I mean, I don't.
Right, definitely not.
I feel like. Oh, sorry, bro.
No, you're good, man. So for me personally, I think to be considered like the GOAT, to the number one criteria, or at least some of the top criteria should be how you're winning. Is it convincing, or are you barely skating through on decisions? A decision's okay. It's okay to have decisions. Convincing decisions are sometimes more fun than a submission or something like that, because you get those extra rounds out of it. If it's a great fight, but it's a convincing win, that's always really good to watch. The level of competition they're going against. I mean, when Conor got brought in, he went against Marcus Brimage. Marcus Brimage was kind of like already a gatekeeper type guy, flatlined him. Poirier wasn't on the streak that he was on yet, knocked him out. So I'm not saying he didn't beat. Yeah, right. Holloway was still a boy, like really. And then he beat Dennis Seaver. So, I mean, not
Chad
looking back
and Jose Aldo.
And then
Chad Mendez on a week or two notice, right? So, I mean, at that point, it's not the most convincing for the GOAT argument when you look back at GSP, when you look at what John Jones has done, what Fedor's done.
I remember
Anderson Silva, I think they're all above him.
Fedor was fighting in, the Wild West of MMA, where everybody was on steroids. We're fighting 10 minutes in the first round, and the Yakuza's paying us in cash. And there's something, I think, to
you're getting soccer kicked.
Yeah, there's something that should be taken into consideration. It's almost like when you kind of talk about like football or Michael Jordan, and compared to basketball nowadays, is Jordan back then, they were getting the shit beat out of them. Those Piston teams from Detroit, they were throwing elbows. I mean, they had the Jordan rules that were basically like, every time he gets airborne, we're hitting them. And so you think about Pride back then and some of those, old early MMA circuits where you had a lot more you had to deal with.
For sure.
So, and you didn't have the weight classes. God knows what people were on. They're probably doing EPO. They're probably doing, horse
E-ball,
steroids, DECA, whatever.
It's not what they were on; it's what they weren't on.
Yeah, I mean,
and I mean that
you could always bring up
includes Fedor. You can't say he did, but you can't say he didn't.
He didn't have the body of a steroid user, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah. To be a GOAT, to me, it's you can be a GOAT, but you gotta you can be one of the greatest of all time, and then that's an easier argument to make than it is to be like, I am the greatest of all time. And I understand why Conor wants to put himself in that light. And I mean, it's not like it's an undeserved group to put him with. I suppose I wouldn't put him above John or GSP at this moment.
Oh, never.
But
Financially, he's the GOAT.
Well,
Financially,
sure. I
but when it
wouldn't
comes
put
to
Anderson
resume,
above. I wouldn't put
no,
Anderson at one either. It's
no,
seems
definitely
like
not.
a
Well,
like
GOAT status, you I almost kind of think of it like you got to have the Infinity Gauntlet. You got to have all the gems of the gauntlet to be the GOAT. And, longevity is one of them. You got to win in spectacular fashion. You got to have highlight reel wins and knockouts. You have to evolve the game and push the sport as it is forward. You know what I mean? And, I said longevity, but, however many you have, you got to have all of those to be considered that. So, before anybody can be taken into consideration, I feel like they have to fit those parameters.
Well, Zach, with that criteria, I mean, that kind of screams George St. Pierre for me.
That's what I was going to say, Nick.
And like what you said, Brad, is that like, he has no unavenged losses on his record. He has 2 career losses that, he lost to Matt Hughes and beat him twice by finish. Lost to Matt Serra, beat him by finish. And what Zach was just saying about evolving the game, I mean, if George St. Pierre doesn't exist, this sport is not nearly as advanced as it is now. And he was somebody that people looked at where like how to emulate and how do we catch up to this guy, and we need to find his training methods, and it's almost like he is the Michael Jordan of this sport if there has to be one. Because
here's my only issue with GSP a little bit, and I love GSP. He's an amazing martial artist and an athlete, especially. Is GSP was, to me, more of an athlete than almost anybody else he was coming up against.
Right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
GSP versus Matt Serra, to me, is not exactly a fair fight. I just, GSP's got what, like 6 inches of height on Serra?
And about
Sarah
8
should have
more
been at
abs.
55.
And, when you're pumping a jab at a guy and he's got 6 inches of height on you, you're in for a bad day. So, I mean, that's one of the things of like, you look at his competition. Like, was GSP's competition on the level that these other guys were talking about?
I think unquestionably GSP's level was. GSP went through the elite of 3 generations at 170.
Yeah, I think his resume even holds up now. I think like guys like a prime Nick Diaz, Carlos Condit. You got a more prime.
Come
BJ
on, man. You put Nick Diaz or Carlos Condit physically, take them with their shirt off at the weigh-in next to GSP. GSP looks like an action figure compared to those guys.
Yeah, he looks like an action figure compared to
Diaz
everybody.
and all has incredible cardio and stuff like that. Neither guy has the explosive, fast twitch muscle fiber of GSP.
No.
And that's why guys can't defend that blast double of his.
He's the greatest athlete that's ever been in this sport.
Just about. He's doing fucking backflips and
yeah. But him being a superior athlete shouldn't take away from what he does in the cage.
No, I'm just saying that the guys that he came up against, they weren't even on his level physically, let alone style ability wise.
Jake Shields is a tank. He fought Johnny Hendricks, who was on every steroid.
Right, and obviously not a real athlete.
No. But I mean, look, he beat Dan Hardy, he beat BJ Penn, he beat John Fitch. His hit list is
some good guys, all good
guys,
but no Tyron Woodleys, no Kamaru Usmans, no even Coby Covingtons. I mean, those guys are fucking jacked athletes now.
True.
I gotta say,
because of GSP though, they are the children of GSP.
He might have, set the trend. I'll give you that.
And I honestly think a prime GSP beats a lot of those guys. Honestly, I know the sport evolves. I know
beats Woodley,
but I would like to have
Covington.
seen him tested against guys like that.
Yeah, of course,
for sure. But he tested himself against the guys that were at that level at his time.
You can only compete against who's in front of you, 100%.
And I don't see his 5-round decisions as necessarily his fight being boring.
No, they're dominating.
What are you going to do against Jake Shields and Carlos Condit but fight for 5 rounds and hope.
Those are the same people
you
who get
can't
mad
knock
when they
out
watch
Carlos
Floyd Mayweather
Condit.
fights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
They don't appreciate it for what it is.
So to wrap back to Conor and what he was saying, one of the things that bugs me, I do understand when it comes to being great, you have to believe in yourself and you have to put yourself in that picture, in that conversation. If you want to be great, you have to believe it. But I almost look at it as you got to have other people tell you where you stand on the GOAT list rather than placing yourself on it, because it just doesn't seem like something a great of the sport does. Like, oh, I'm number 2 of all time. I feel like you got to let other people do that.
I don't know. Like, there are some personalities out there. I mean, like Deion Sanders is kind of an example.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? When you ask Deion who the greatest of all time is, he'll say Jerry, LT, Prime, which is obviously, you know, kind of ridiculous, but, you know, defensively, you almost could argue it.
And a guy like Conor, an extreme winner like Conor, I understand where his assessments, while skewed and slightly off to fit his narrative, do make sense. And an extreme winner like Conor is obviously going to be cocky like that. Obviously going to say, I'm number 2 and I will be number 1 by the end of my career. Which, I mean, if he comes back and has another run like he did, maybe he will.
I'll tell you what, honestly, when you really break down his record and his run so far in the UFC, he's got a little bit of an argument.
No, he really does.
You know,
he's not wrong.
Especially looking at who, like, for example, who Dustin Poirier is now, who Max Holloway is now. You know what I mean? And, you know,
he beat the greatest featherweight ever.
The Cowboy Cerrone fight you got to look at now. The second fight against Nate Diaz, who is a much larger opponent than Conor. And
I have a question
honestly,
about that.
The Floyd Mayweather fight. I'm sorry, but the fact that Conor went in there and boxed with Floyd Mayweather, the greatest boxer of all time, for 10 fucking rounds is insane.
That's very crazy.
And you should take that into consideration.
All of that has to be in consideration. The only thing that bothers me is everybody is always like, Diaz is so much bigger than Conor. He fought Cowboy and it wasn't a problem. He fights guys that are bigger than him, and it's not a problem. But because he lost to Diaz, who has always fought also at 155, except for a couple of special fights at 70.
Nate Diaz never even sniffed 145, which Conor used to fight at.
Which is fair.
So he's naturally a smaller guy. But all I'm saying is he fought at the higher weight on the short notice and all.
Yeah, right. Like he was eating steaks. Also. Like he was eating big tomahawk steaks and stuff to make 170, and he barely did it. He was like 168.9 or something.
There's no reason for him to be at 170.
So, well,
it was a ridiculous idea.
Right, right, 100%. Yeah,
100%. That if you want to catch weight, fight at 65, fight at 66.
And he was not ready for that physically, and he went into that fight full of food and water, trying to make the weight. I mean, I know, like, if I eat a whole bunch of food, I feel terrible.
Tequila bender in Tijuana.
But you have to remember that all he does. No, he definitely beat his ass. But you have to remember that Nate and those guys, all they do in their free time is smoke weed and run like 40 miles a day. You're like literally, he's like a robot.
And ride bikes too.
Exactly. Yeah, they're crazy.
And do
they're fucking crazy. And do nunchucks.
When it comes to Conor viewpoints, it's definitely there's 2 extremes. There's one extreme that I see more often is people discrediting everything Conor does when it comes to, you know, Chad Mendes had a 2-week camp, and then
I think that benefited Chad more than Conor, to be honest.
Sure. And there's excuse
Conor
for that.
Preparing for Aldo that whole time, and then all of a sudden you get
has to worry about a short, stocky wrestler. Yeah, but you have the guys discrediting his run.
Let's not forget that Chad Mendes was winning that fight for 2 whole rounds, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just rewatched that fight. Chad Mendes was winning the fight for the first round. The second round was a lot of Conor.
Conor got up with
elbows from the bottom.
Yeah, elbows from the bottom and stuff like that, but it was all from the bottom. Conor got up in like the last 20 seconds.
Yeah, but he had already hurt Chad throughout the second round.
Mm-hmm. A little bit, but I still if that round ends with Conor on his back, you still give it to Chad, and he's up 2-0.
My thing is, you have guys discrediting Conor McGregor at every given turn with his resume, with his win, saying that excuse with Mendes and all of his fights, really. And you have the other side where you have Conor fans that make it seem like his hurdles are way bigger than they actually are. Like Brad saying, they make Nate Diaz sound like a world beater 170 pounder when you talk about when he faced him the first time I lost to him. It's like Nate Diaz is a true lightweight, a true 155er that doesn't win all of his fights. I mean, yes, he's a great fighter, but they've made him seem like this two-weight world champion when he wasn't.
Right.
This is what Eddie Alvarez was pointing out, is that, Nate was a lightweight that wins half his fights and loses half his fights. It's like you got to find a medium in there somewhere with extreme pro-Conor, extreme anti-Conor.
Well, that's just the problem with fans. People are either crazy fans and they pump him up more than he should be, or they're haters. They're not. This is the problem with people who are fans of people and not fans of the sport,
Right.
or the craft, or whatever you want to call it.
Let's play a hypothetical here. Let's say, when was it that Conor fought Khabib? That was September 2018.
Yeah,
around there.
So.
So let's just play a hypothetical that he wins that fight. He knocks Khabib out. Are we having a strong GOAT conversation after that?
100%.
Oh yeah, for
I feel like you would definitely have to.
Khabib is the best lightweight of all time at this moment.
Khabib's on his way to.
After Tony lost to Gaethje, Khabib is definitely, in my eyes, the number one.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes a very convincing case for Justin. The way he handled that Tony fight, I'm so excited to see him fight Khabib. I mean,
Well, here's another
thing. Arguably, he has the best wrestling, second or third best wrestling in the 155-pound division. And he has probably the best or second best defensive wrestling at 155 pounds. Yeah.
Right, and you're kind of just touching on it already. Gaethje's wrestling in MMA with no singlet, no shoes, a cage wall is probably good enough to stave off the takedowns from Khabib.
Definitely. I mean, he wrestled Jordan Burroughs 2 times, and he got double-legged once in the last minute of the third period of their first match, and then he never hit him with it again.
And let's put that into perspective. Ben Askren.
No one stops a Jordan Burroughs last double.
Ben Askren
got sent to the moon
in like 5 seconds, and he was this super high-level wrestler.
He got taken.
Oh man, when that happened.
Right, definitely out of his prime, not in the best shape, but it still happened.
It's just to put into context for people that don't know Jordan Burroughs, but would know skill level of an Askren in wrestling specifically.
Oh, so this is an example of that, styles make fights. And here we have an example of Justin Gaethje, who has got good enough takedown defense to keep the fight on the feet, especially because we're talking about a 5-minute round fight where you get stood up at the end of every round also. And he's going to potentially force Khabib into a kickboxing match. Mm-hmm. And what happens when Khabib Nurmagomedov gets in a kickboxing match with Justin Gaethje?
Justin Gaethje kicks the legs the hardest. His striking is looking incredibly crisp. I mean, he's looking like the man right now, coming off that Tony fight.
But I'll tell you what, Conor McGregor knocks him out. Because styles make fights.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If you're Conor, you sit back and you wait for Justin to beat Khabib. You come in and you beat Justin. And you get that belt back without having to fight Khabib again.
I could not agree more.
That's what I do.
Do you really imagine Justin Gaethje going for a double leg on Conor McGregor? I mean, I can't.
He's not an offensive wrestler.
Not at all.
Gaethje will tell you this himself. He's not an offensive wrestler. Through his whole wrestling career since he was like 6 years old, he's always been a defensive wrestler. That's why I'm not worried about it, Khabib. Yeah, pretty much. I was always a defensive wrestler. I can wrestle offensively, but it's just not. I'm very defensive. I'll bait people into things, hit gator
snatch
rolls,
people's
shit like
necks.
that. Occasionally, on occasion, I do that.
Well, maybe your neck, Nick.
Damn.
Oh, your neck too, Brad. Seen it a few times.
Usually he gets my arm.
I mean,
true.
Usually he gets whatever he wants to get.
Give him that.
So Gaethje has, not that it's not going to happen, but I'm probably the least concerned out of all of the lightweight division to see Khabib try to take him down. And he's even said it himself. I'm not going to fight on the cage because Khabib wants to blast double me against the cage, finish the takedown, pummel me. What was Brad's coined term? The Dagestani handcuff or something like that, right?
That's not my term. That's what they call it.
Right. So
I got that from DC.
So he does that. That's how he beats everybody. Gaethje even said it. He said, "Look, man, I'm going to stand in the center, punch this dude in the face, try to kick his legs till they fall off, and I'm not going to let him take me down in the center of the cage. He takes people down on the fence. If I stand in the middle of the cage and trade with him, he can't handle it." And I kind of agree with him.
Question for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can Khabib take the shots that Tony took from Justin?
Oh, God,
no.
Oh, God, no. God,
a
no.
brick wall
No,
can't take those shots.
Right. Tony, he's unkillable, and he almost died.
Yeah.
That's the closest to death I've ever seen Tony Ferguson by a long shot.
Anybody. I think that might be anybody.
Except for Anthony Smith, I ain't ever seen anybody take it.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Anthony Smith's teeth were falling out. What the fuck was happening?
He needs some dentifix or whatever it is, man.
He needs a shock doctor, mouth guard.
I'm a big fan of James Krause. I love James Krause. I think he's a brilliant mind, a brilliant fighter, but I think he dropped the ball being in Anthony Smith's corner, and then I blame the corner the most.
Have you heard Anthony Smith's response to that, though?
Yeah, he hates it. I mean, I understand him.
He specifically told his corner, "You may not ever throw in the towel for me. It is not an option." He said, "If you are in my corner, you can't do it." Now, I would never corner someone like that. But, I mean, when you're being paid by someone and this is their dream and blah, 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 and all that shit, I understand where a corner can do it. I would never accept those terms. But, I mean, then what? You walk away and don't send your guy in with the best training he can go in, and he goes in anyway? There's a difficult situation.
I get it.
Especially if it's somebody that you train with every day and that's one of your brothers, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't let that happen to any of you guys because I don't want to see you get punched in the head so many times that for the rest of your life you have to read with your finger under every word you read. Like, I don't want that to be you. I want you to be lively and happy. I don't want you to be punch drunk, walking backwards up the stairs and shit. I don't want that for anybody.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I couldn't agree to those terms at all.
Yeah, if at any point I hand the referee some of my teeth, for the love of God, stop the fight. But I mean, so you want to be a fighter, right?
Yeah, exactly. To get back to our point, I wanted to touch on this because what Zach was saying, styles make fights. You know, we watched Tony Ferguson get the shit beat out of him, and honestly, I mean, people need to remember the styles make fights because even after that's all said and done, I'm still disappointed we didn't see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov because it's not like Khabib would have done that to him. It would have been
Khabib
a completely new set of problems.
Not what Justin did.
Khabib
no, not at all.
No, he'll never be
completely new set of problems, and maybe Tony would have won. I still think he could have. I still think he's
for sure. Yeah, I think Tony 100%. Wins that fight, man.
I've always when we had that kind of three-way going of Conor, Khabib, Tony. I always thought Khabib is going to beat Conor, but Conor can beat Tony. But Tony, I think, can beat Khabib.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Right, and round and round we go.
Conor and Tony looks a lot like Conor Nate, and it could go either way.
I think it looks a lot like Gaethje Tony. I think Conor puts the hands on
I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into it, man. I'm not too honestly, sure how I feel about that.
Conor Tony to me seems like another Diaz fight because, I mean, maybe he's putting it on him, but again, Tony can take whatever, and then Conor doesn't have the wrestling Justin
Tony
has.
Goes in with the game plan that he had against Gaethje. I know Gaethje's a great defensive wrestler, so Tony never even thought about shooting or turning it into a grappling match.
Tony tried some takedowns.
He tried an Imanari super late in the fight after he'd taken a ton of damage.
He had tried.
Yeah, he was already punch drunk.
Oh,
no, that was his only shot. That's the only time he went for a takedown.
He tried to set up takedowns.
He did it. He did it when he was punch drunk. No, he didn't want to. You can even see Eddie Bravo said this on the Rogan podcast. He didn't attempt a takedown until the fourth, or I guess coming into the fifth round. Eddie was like, "You're getting your ass beat, man. Maybe do an Imanari roll. I don't know." And then he went for it, but he's been beat so bad. His legs are swollen twice as big as they normally are. So he's like he's on ice skates. Like that's basically what's going on. He's on
And
ice
if
skates
Tony
and he's
comes in
trying to
with that
take
same
somebody
game
down.
plan, if Tony comes in with that same game plan against Conor, where he's like, I'm not going to wrestle, I'm just going to box this guy, well, then Conor McGregor knocks out Tony Ferguson probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
more than likely.
Work with this for me for a second. You can, we all know this, you can be trying to take someone down and set up a takedown without actually shooting your takedown. And my point is, if you watch the fight, Tony is trying to get into position for his takedowns. He's trying to get into position to maybe like get an ankle pick and stuff. And Justin doesn't allow him to be in position.
I disagree. To me, he looked like he was kickboxing.
Most of the fight.
I agree with Zach. Yeah,
most of the
I would
fight
have
he
to
was.
agree.
But there are times in the fight, if you go back and watch, he wants to set up a takedown. He wants to change levels. And then Justin shuts it down.
You know, I'm going off of what he said pre-fight. And pre-fight, he said he wanted to strike with him.
I mean, we all saw the fight. I'm not saying he didn't mostly strike. I'm saying that when he did make a couple attempts, not excluding the Imanari roll, but there were a couple of other attempts, and Justin shut them all down.
I just disagree that a couple attempts is using your grappling.
It's not. I'm not saying it's using your grappling. I'm saying it's showing the level that Justin can shut down. He shut down Tony even trying to set up his funky shit. Tony didn't dance at all, you know? And that's how Tony fights. He dances.
Well, Tony himself is not a big offensive wrestler either.
No, but he was also a wrestler. I'm just saying, I don't want to take anything away from Justin because he did show that he could keep even the unorthodox entries of Tony Ferguson from even setting up.
But I still kind of agree with Zach in the sense that there was only one real takedown attempt. And even if you watch that post-fight Rogan podcast with Eddie, Joe even asked him, like, what were you saying to him going in there? And Eddie was like, look, man, I didn't say anything to him until it was my turn to go in the cage. They were only letting one coach in the cage at a time, I think is what he said. I basically went in there and said, fuck it, Imanari roll, because obviously this whole stand-up thing isn't working. And even his striking coaches said that. They even said, look, man, if you're going to make this a kickboxing fight, you're going to have to be the best kickboxer you've ever been. If you're kickboxing, you're kickboxing. And that's what happened. Eddie even said that. He said he didn't attempt anything until that fifth round. He was strictly kickboxing with Justin Gaethje until that fifth round.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I was just pointing out that, like, Tony sets up his takedowns not inconvenient. Oh my God, I can't even remember the word.
Just really goofy.
Unorthodox ways.
Unorthodox ways.
Yeah, unorthodox ways. And Justin shut down all those things that he would normally do to start.
Yeah, he brushes it off. He brushes it off like nothing. Yeah, he's excellent defensively.
Yeah, well, that's all I'm saying is give Justin his props for shutting down.
For sure, I 100% agree.
Even being able to initiate grappling.
I'm gonna watch that fight back eventually because I haven't yet. I'm gonna look for what Brad was seeing there with, like, Tony gonna try to set up his takedown attempts in certain methods. But I did want to move on because we were on that topic for a while. We do have some fights this Saturday. The headliner is Gilbert Burns versus Tyron Woodley. You know, I think this is the first fight back for Tyron Woodley since he lost his title to Kamaru Usman. And that's a very, very big deal, very big storyline going into this because
does anybody listen to his rap album?
Year and a half of living on that dominant loss where he was the odds-on favorite to going into that fight, and to get really your career change like that where you just shut down from bell to bell. How does he come back from that? To cover it briefly, Brad, how do you see this fight going? Gilbert Burns, with the momentum he has of being the first person, or actually the second person to finish Damian Maia with strikes. What do you think of this?
Oh man, I have been waiting for Tyron Woodley to come back. I'm a huge Tyron Woodley fan. I know I'm in the minority of people for this. I'm a huge
Tyron his rap album.
I'm not going to talk about that. I'm a huge Tyron Woodley fan. He has some bars, but whatever. He's better in a cage. I'm a huge Tyron Woodley fan. I can't wait to see how he bounces back. Gilbert Burns is a huge test. Gilbert Burns is amazing on the ground, and his striking's coming around. I am actually very pumped for this fight. I don't know how it's going to go because we haven't seen Woodley in so long. If we see Woodley the way he was, rain down fire on that dude. I don't know if there's many people that can take that. But what if he's not back and he gets, we see what another high level wrestler can do when Woodley's not on his game 100%. I don't know if Woodley and Usman fight 10 times, it's 9 Usman, it's 6 Usman. I pick Usman to win out, the majority, but that might be a 6-4 split. I don't know if it's not like it's a 9-1 split. It's a really close fight. I don't know. I can't make a pick because I don't know what Woodley's going to look like.
Yeah,
but Burns has been on a run,
sure.
and I wouldn't be surprised if he could get the win.
Very interesting stylistic matchup. Brock, do you think the winner of this gets a title shot with everything going on? I mean, Colby seems to be on the sideline still, and Masvidal, there's talks of Masvidal and Usman fighting, but it seems like that's kind of cooled down. So do you think the winner of this fight goes right for Usman?
I'm not mad at that, actually. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Same thing like Brad was saying. The mental state thing with whatever Tyron Woodley came into with that fight. People have off nights. Everybody does. Nobody's perfect. That's how it goes. Now, John Jones has had off nights and still won like the OSP fight and things like that. But he's like next level talent, But Tyron Woodley, right? I'm a big fan of Tyron Woodley as well. I might be a better rapper than him, but that's for another day. And so I might be a better rapper. My ears were bleeding. My ears were bleeding the first time I listened to it. I would rather watch Holly Holm dance on TikTok for the rest of my life.
I'd rather watch Puddle of Mud perform Nirvana covers than listen to Tyron Woodley's rap.
Listen, Nick.
What did you love it, Max? Did you love that beautiful cover that
No, you need to shut up right now.
Yeah, he said put some respect on his name.
I can kick you from this call, Nick.
Max is throwing fucking shade.
I think Gilbert Burns takes the win.
Okay, yeah, back to what we're really talking about.
Yeah, right. I think Gilbert Burns takes the win if Tyron hasn't been training as much as it looks like he hasn't. He's been on TMZ doing all this shit, all my music album, and that's cool. Like, I like that he's into that, man. Good for him. I'm hoping he's getting paid. I really hope so. But fighting is one of those things you can't have one foot out of the door. You just can't. It never works well for anybody. And I feel like Gilbert Burns is about as hot as he can get right now, especially coming off that Damian Maia fight. So.
Woodley is also 38, which is, that's your bar right there. Where you gonna be?
Zach, obviously we're bringing up these questions of where Woodley stands. Is he going to come back and be the same championship form Woodley that we saw before? But my question is, even if he comes back looking like normal Woodley was looking kind of off in his title defenses. Yes, he did what he had to do against Damian Maia and Wonder Boy, but he didn't seem like that same killer that we saw getting to the belt. So do you think if we see the killer Woodley, or do we see the conservative fight to win Woodley?
Well, I mean, both Maia, the weird thing about those fights is both Maia and Wonder Boy are specialists.
Yes.
And it's weird when you're fighting a specialist. You try to, the question is, do you avoid what he's doing? Do you, try and counter it? When Woodley got in there with Usman, who is a very similar fighter, or, he knocked out Robbie Lawler, but he hasn't fought a similar fighter to him since Lawler. And when he came back around to Usman, he had problems. Whether it's age, whether it's, listening to him talk about fighting on the Rogan podcast, him having this ridiculous rap career. To me, that's a guy whose heart isn't in fighting. And it's hard to make up for, you can fight late into your 30s or early 40s if you're really invested in it. You know what I mean? If that's what your life is. But when you're doing other shit, you know what I mean? It's hard to motivate. And like Brock said, Gilbert Burns is on fire right now. Is this an occasion of a fight where you got a guy who's on the rise and a guy who's on the decline?
It's all about momentum in the sport. You've said multiple times I've quoted you on is the magic, and I think Gilbert Burns has the definition of magic when he just defeated one of the more prominent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stars that has ever been in this sport in the way that he did.
Yeah, I mean, part of having the magic is the guy across from you. You kind of magic to me, like the more I think about this theory of mine, I think that part of it is for it to be magic, you have to steal it from someone else. You know what I mean? Like when Anderson Silva ninja kicked Vitor, he stole some of Vitor's soul. Vitor's never the same guy after that. When Anderson strangled Dan Henderson, you know what I mean? Stole a little bit of his fire, stole a little bit of his personality, of his aura to add to his. You know what I mean? Like I just took your shit
with
and
Matt Hughes.
Right.
And then
So,
Sarah and then BJ Penn.
Has Gilbert Burns snatched something? He's beaten some good guys and he beat them in some spectacular fashion, but it's going to take a victory like that over Tyron Woodley to consider him having the magic.
Ultimately, what is your prediction of this fight?
I'm going with Gilbert Burns. I'm going with the guy who is fully invested into fighting against the aging veteran who, while on top of his game, you're talking about a guy who kicked Carlos Condit in the leg and broke his shit. You know what I mean? It takes a real athlete to do that. You're talking about a guy who slept Darren Till, you know what I mean, badly, and then darsed him. Did he finish him with the darce? I know he was trying to set up a
darce or anaconda.
Okay, but I remember him setting it up. I couldn't remember if he finished him with it or if he ended up ground and pounding him. But either way, yeah, that guy, sure, that guy definitely can beat Gilbert Burns. But is that guy going to be in there? And to me, with the time he's taken off, what he's been doing on the side, his age, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying completely because I don't knock him for those things ultimately because it takes a smart man to get his future etched out. And I don't like the rap career, but if it makes him money, then more power to him. But it's
all it is though is something that's on your mind that's not fighting.
Right.
Like for example, Tony. I think Tony is the type of guy who could come back from this loss. You know what I mean? He's a crazy person who does nothing but train and fight. And that's all his life is. Tyron's got other shit going on. And whether or not his rap albums are good or not, his mind is other places.
So, if I had to give a prediction, I mean, I do think it's a very interesting style matchup and very interesting situational matchup as far as how long Woodley's been gone. But I would say I think Gilbert Burns wins, and I would like to see him in the title picture because I am a fan of the guy. But Brad, I know we were talking about this earlier. There are some fights on the undercard and even on the main card that are interesting. Which one sticks out to you the most?
I always like to see Tim Elliott fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking weird, and I love it. And Luis Sweet Chin Music Smoker.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite flyweights. He's at bantamweight now, but I'm a big fan of Louis Smoker.
Yeah. I mean, and then Caitlin Chukagian's getting her second Shevchenko in a row. That'll be interesting.
The easier one, I guess.
Statistically, I guess, or like on paper, yeah. But I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna end. But the one I'm most excited for, the fight I'm most excited for, I believe it's this weekend, or I'm sorry, this coming weekend, I guess. Chase Cooper, or is it Hooper or Cooper?
Hooper with an H, yeah.
Hooper. Chase Hooper and Alex Caceres.
Yeah, it's a good fight. It seems like Alex Caceres always finds himself being like the gatekeeper for some of these younger guys when they're coming up. And there was a time where Bruce Leroy was kind of promising. You thought he might even crack into the top 15, but things haven't really worked out. But I do like that fight a lot when it comes to the younger guy versus a measuring stick, if you will.
Yeah, Alex has never really gotten the greatest fights for him. I mean, he fought Crone, right? He fought Crone Gracie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't he got like the shit beat out of him and then strangled, right? He got
Yeah.
ready to get
Eventually,
choked.
yeah.
I Yeah, like things like that. Like the UFC has used him as a fucking punching bag for that division. They've
Well,
thrown him the shittiest competition for him, and he's so game. He's just like, yeah, I'll fight him. Yeah, I'll fight him.
yeah.
And it's almost to his demise. Like I feel like he might not ever break that top 15 because he's taking these really hard fights. And Chase Hooper is a guy that can lose and still be like, I can't even go to a bar yet. What am I worried about? You know what I mean? I'll recover from this. But he's at the point in his career where he's either going to do this for the rest of his life, or he's going to continue, or he's going to, I guess, evolve, or he's going to continue being that guy who is just beating the guy who eventually will fight for the belt or be that top 10 guy. Which I'd like to see him break top 10, man. I'd really like Alex to break top 10.
I think Alex Caceres is just one of those guys that came along maybe a little too fast, kind of plateaued early.
Definitely, yeah.
Like a Sergio Pettis, a guy who actually both of them were coming up together, and we thought we might see fight a few times, and both of them never really got as far as we thought. Or like a Miles Jury type, one of those guys that just kind of comes up and then kind of just fades back away after a while.
Yeah, I believe Sergio is fighting for Bellator now, right?
Yeah, I was
think
just going to ask
most
that.
of those guys I just named are in Bellator now.
Miles Jury, I think, is in Bellator now. Yeah. I mean, I'm not mad at it, man. They're still making the money. They're honestly pretty entertaining fights. They've had entertaining fights, so
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it. I guess as long as they're getting their money.
One last thing before we go. What do you guys feel about Dana White saying that he won't pay John Jones and Francis Ngannou as much as they want to fight, saying like this is the worst time to ask for more money and stuff like that?
Well, I think that's kind of a cheap argument for Dana White to go to if that's really what he said.
It is.
I think it just gets back to the point. It hasn't been a hot topic this year as much as it was a couple years ago, where there was talks of a union, because it seems like every other sport has their stuff together when it comes to the athletes, joining for the right cause and working for each other. Where I feel like this sport right now, it's kind of like you fight for yourself, which I understand the culture of a fighter. You're about it yourself and that's it. But I think once fighters realize if they work together, then it'll benefit everybody else individually. Then we'll be getting to a better spot, because 15% revenue for the athletes that put the food on the table for these higher ups in the UFC. I think that's ridiculous. I think we need to get to a point where fighters are getting a bigger piece of the pie, where you have younger guys in the UFC who, after they pay their trainers and pay everybody else involved in their training camps, they're not sitting with peanuts, because that's what happens. And it's very unfortunate. Yes, I understand the concept of working your way up, but if you're a fighter and you're getting punched in the head for a living, you're training to get better, you get punched in the head when you're training and sparring, then making that kind of money is just not good, and it's not going to help the sport grow. I think when it comes to giving the fighters a bigger piece of the pie, it's actually a long-term investment, because more people, more athletes will be interested in joining the sport, and it will grow the organization.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think that's what the amateurs are for. You know what I mean? You go through your amateur career to then get to a point when you're a pro. You shouldn't be making $6,000 to show and $6,000 to win, where by the end of the fight, you've gotten punched in the head 300 times, and you might have enough money to get some fucking gummy bears and a soda on your way home from the airport. It's crazy to me that that's like the pay scale. And you do have guys like Conor McGregor, GSP, John Jones, who are millionaires from fighting in the UFC, but it's so rare, and it's not very evenly distributed, and you see that all the time.
Boxing too, though. It's rare in most professional sports. I mean, most professional sports, even football and basketball and whatnot, yeah, their pay scales might be higher than like the UFC's,
much higher.
But in comparison to what the top guys are making, you take your average guy in the MLB, and yeah, his contracts are definitely higher than the UFC guys. That's for sure. But if you look at his comparison contract to the highest guys paid in baseball, it's peanuts. And it's just like
for sure.
You see the same disparity over whatever sport it is. Do fighters in the UFC need to be paid more? Sure, I would love to see those guys get paid more. You know what I mean? I'm a believer in that. It's probably, besides football, the most damaging sport that you can participate in. And those guys need to be taken care of, obviously. But why Dana's not going to pay them whatever they want for this fight doesn't make any sense to me, because I think it's a freak show fight, and people
It's going to do the numbers. It's 100% going to make
a freak show fight.
It's going to do the numbers. They're going to get their money back.
Some of John's fights haven't had the biggest draws as of late, but I think that's because most people know that, like, oh, well, John Jones is probably just going to beat this guy. When John Jones has like a real opponent across from him, like a Daniel Cormier or a Gustafsson, those fights did really well number-wise. And I'm sorry, if you market Francis Ngannou with his highlight reel of ridiculous knockouts, and you say that John Jones, arguably the greatest fighter of all time, is going to fight this big, giant monster, people are going to fucking buy it.
Sells itself. And
I mean,
yeah.
The only thing I can think is if you wanted the UFC to go full boxing, Bob Arum style, and just feed Ngannou like a ton of dudes to just rack up that highlight reel and then make something bigger. But Ngannou doesn't want those fights right now. He wants the belt or he wants John. So you're not going to be able to make a fight like that.
I think he's got enough knockouts at this point. After the last one, people know him enough at this point that
he's the boogeyman.
That's the fight to make. If you're gonna put Stipe and DC together one more time, and then both guys, or definitely one guy, is gonna walk away after that, and nobody wants to fight the boogeyman, let John, because John has nobody left to fight in 205. So let him fight the one guy that nobody wants to fight at heavyweight. Run that freak show.
It makes all the sense in the world to make the fight. It could be the biggest fight. And holy crap, what if Ngannou lands and John just drops like everyone else?
I mean,
the world could
probably
change.
What's going to happen.
I mean, what if John
that's a large possibility.
Starts elbowing him to death, and he turns his back and gets strangled, and then John once again is like, "Who the fuck is the GOAT? Who?"
That's
right.
I mean,
you
that's
get
more
that too.
That's more what I expect to happen. I would pick John in that fight. I would still pick DC in a fight against Ngannou, if I'm being honest with you.
I would.
I don't know. I might not. I might have to put the money on Ngannou's giant fist.
DC would have taken him down right away. Did you see how far and wide those shots were coming from?
That's true.
You got to get.
I don't know. He has cinder blocks on the ends of his wrists,
and you have to give.
I don't know.
All the credit. Rosenstruck stayed in the pocket, tried to weave through the leg kicks, was landing strikes on Ngannou, and just couldn't stop him from coming forward. You need to circle.
Ngannou punched through his defense. Yeah, he didn't give a fuck.
He smashed the shit out of him. He doesn't care. You can't fight Ngannou that way. I mean, all the props for doing it to Rosenstruck. Oh fuck no! Don't do that. Just
does Jones duck low and grab a leg?
Yeah, doesn't ankle pick the shit out of him
when he's charging him at him like that. Yeah, it's possible.
Or just double.
I mean, Stipe did it, but Stipe did it, but that was like a very different Ngannou. I feel like.
Yeah,
but I think DC would be the guy to do that if there was a guy to do that.
Brock, if someone's coming at you swinging wide as shit like this, what are you doing?
Look, ready, ha! That's what I'm doing.
No. Fucking double leg the shit out of that dude, because we all know if someone's charging at you, that's the easiest time to hit a double leg.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just drop your hips and drive.
Yeah, and they're coming at you. Which
they're so off balance. Yeah, for sure.
You think would make it harder, but it actually makes it way easier.
But
DC and John both.
If I get hit with a cement-filled mailbox on the way in.
Oh, yeah,
it's probably not going to end well.
Yeah, ask Kane what happens if you get hit.
And we're not talking about a mailbox in front of a house. We're talking about one of those blue joints the post office has sitting on the corner. That's a Francis Ngannou mailbox.
All right. I mean, I think we're all in agreement here that. I mean, okay. Here, that's what I wanted to wrap up saying. In most other sports leagues, the split between athlete and ownership is closer to 50% than it is to, like 10%. And I don't think that it necessarily needs to be 50%. per fighters or whatever. But I think if we could get fighters closer towards like an overall, the fighters are paid this larger percentage out instead of it just being 20% of revenue brought in. I mean, it can only help build the sport, like Nick said, because the reason top athletes don't come here and we have a dearth of talent in divisions above 170 is because those athletes are in the big four major sports making a ton of money. So it's a double-edged sword because the UFC likes to have the control that they have, and they do that by running their company the way they have successfully for 26, 27 years now, something like that. So, but we all agree, back the money truck up, pay John, pay Francis. Let's watch this shit. Do we have anything else we want to do before we wrap it up?
I think that'll do it for me.
All right, then. For Brock, for Nick, for Zach, and for DJ Max on the ones and twos, this is the Mat Time Podcast, and we will see you on the mats.
Appreciate y'all tuning in again.
Oh, like, subscribe, share, comment, all that shit.
Peace.